Hello, everybody. I'm Candid Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channels 249, 250, and of course the Her Network today because of our special guest, channel 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. And don't forget to subscribe to Candid Stanisci 1030 on YouTube. Now, on CFL Talk, my favorite co-host, well, he's the only co-host I have, so I guess that's kind of a redundant statement, David Morassutti, and our very, very, very special guest, Daniella, as my mother would say, Ponticelli.
That's exactly right, Frank. That was very nice. That was very
that's
nice.
that's what happens when you're raised. Anyway, doesn't matter. Let's. We have a network here called the Her Network. So because we have a lady on, it'll be broadcast on that channel. And if we could first, sort of as part of the talking about what you do, you did the Saskatchewan Huskies women's hockey, right? I
Yes,
played for
that's
that,
where it
right?
started. Yeah, that's where the hockey started. Yep.
Well, let's start at the very beginning. And what brought you to sports? What made you think, this is what I want to do?
It's a great question, Frank. It really started, I was already doing journalism, news, sports, whatever you needed, right? General journalism, as they say. And, I would love telling the feature stories in sports, but it wasn't until I started playing roller derby in 2016, which roller derby is one of the most inclusive sports you could ask for, men, women, people of all identities involved in that sport. There's room for everyone. And I loved it. I loved the community, but more than that, I noticed that a lot of their streams, a lot of their broadcasts would have two women in the booth. It wasn't always a woman and a man or just two men. And it was weird how just seeing that sort of like little light in me of I'm already a broadcaster. Yes, I'm focused on news, but maybe there's a way I could put those two passions together. And it was really just having that opportunity through roller derby. And I ended up traveling a lot of the states up until COVID. Um, COVID hit, obviously, which stopped everything. But that was part of what got me into the play by play seat. And I really caught the bug. I loved it. And then I spent a season working full time with the Saskatchewan the Saskatchewan
Yep.
Rush of the National Lacrosse League. And I was doing everything. I was their in-game host. I was also hosting a television program for them. I was a videographer, an editor, and I loved it. It was exhausting, but it was amazing, and to get to spend a whole season with the team, and so that got me hooked on that aspect. I ended up doing some arena side, or they call it on floor reporting with them, and loved it. But then again, the pandemic hit. It was in that season that the pandemic hit. So I went back to news because that's where there was work. Always sort of thought, maybe I could make a go of the sports thing. Maybe not. Maybe it'll just be a hobby of mine. And it wasn't until that position with Husky Fan, which is its own beautiful thing, an app dedicated to university sports, men's and women's hockey. That opportunity presented itself. I applied, and all of a sudden, I find myself working as a play by play announcer and for a team. So finally kind of getting to combine those things that I really loved and really appreciated, because there's nothing like following a team for a whole season. It's really, there's something so special about it. You get to tell the entire story. The season itself is a story, and I just love that part of it too. And so I got into calling hockey, and that would have been 2021 to the 22 season. Came back last year, and it's just been growing, and I'm falling more and more in love with it. But that's really how it happened. It started with the foundational work of broadcasting, of writing, of hosting, of reporting, of telling stories, and then I just layered onto it with sports and the things that I love about it.
A lot of times, when we watch sports, we make a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of people
Mm.
who don't get to see the behind the scenes and get to understand how a league and how a team are. I'm not talking about looking for scathing
Yeah.
stories. I'm talking about the personal relationships that you have with the game as a play-by-play person, right? Lacrosse, you talked about lacrosse. We're big in lacrosse. So we do a lacrosse show here. We
Yeah.
have the commissioner on here. We'd have everybody on here. We have players, coaches, all the NLL, and it's all about the same thing. It's all about with the NLL and with lacrosse, there's this similarity and symbiosis between the league that you're doing now. You take part with the Saskatchewan
Hmm.
Roughriders, where you have the Rush play their season outside of the CFL Saskatchewan Roughriders. One begins, the other one just ended. One
Yep.
ends, the other one begins. And here in Ontario, you can tell us what it's like in Saskatchewan. Here in Ontario, the same fans that go to the CFL games are the same fans that go to the I know you guys have an issue because you have it's Saskatoon and Regina. For us,
Mhm.
it's now Toronto and Hamilton, and we have a lot of the same people go to both.
You're 100% right. There are a lot of fans who overlap. I know that because I see them, right? I see them coming through the doors at the Saskatchewan Roughriders games, and it's so great to see. And it's their whole family, it's not just one or the other. And one thing that I really hope other people in other provinces can understand is that the love of sports here, it means you are making a commitment. So many people, I know that there are people who travel 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours one way to go see a Rush game. And that's in the middle of winter, right? You don't have the best highway conditions. You don't have the best temperatures. There always used to be a running joke because I was with the Rush in the 2018-2019 season and then 19 to 20. And the 2018 to 19 season, every home game weekend, Frank, it was minus 30 without fail. It was the coldest day. The players used to joke about it. They're like, yeah, we thought we were good. We saw the forecast that it wasn't going to be that cold. And then we arrived. I'm like, I don't know what it is. Every home game weekend was so frigid. And so the fans that come out, it really is a big deal. And there are, of course, great fans from Saskatoon, from or near Saskatoon. It's not like everyone is making a pilgrimage, but the same goes for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. People coming in from Medicine Hat, Alberta, again, about a 5 hour drive one way, or even just far up north. And they'll do it. They'll do it every home game, or at least most of the home games, depending on what night it's played. That's why looking at this season schedule, I'm pretty excited that we have a lot of weekend games. We have some good Saturday games, some Friday games. It just allows people that opportunity to be able to make the drive. And Friday is still a little tricky, Frank, because of people being done work or
Yep.
things like that. Our Rough Rider fan base, of course, lots of farmers. They're going to be out in the fields combining and then harvesting. So the people who come out, they want to be there. They really want to be there.
Oh, absolutely. That's why you have such a big parking lot for the combines, right?
Yeah, they bring their combines.
Yeah.
I
My
don't think
fa-
that would be something, but yeah.
my favorite fan for the Rush is Grandma Rush. She's my favorite. But
She's
anyway,
amazing.
isn't
Joyce out
she?
of Edmonton, from
Yep.
Edmonton, yeah, back when they were the Edmonton Rush.
She
Wonderful.
followed him. Yeah, that was amazing. David, you want to jump in with something? David?
Well, yeah, and I mean, what's you know how I mean, we live here in Toronto, you're out in Saskatchewan. When you do get, I know you've been to Toronto a few times.
Mm.
When you do come here, do you get the sense of just a totally different atmosphere when you come to Toronto for a sporting event versus what you see all the way out in Saskatchewan?
Ooh, again, good question. So I've been to a number of Jays games, and I was just at the Raptors play-in game
Hmm.
that unfortunately they didn't win, but the atmosphere was rocking in the house. Have not been to a Leafs game or anything like that in Toronto, but
Not missing
I
much.
will say this. I will say this. I
Hit or
love
miss.
I love the atmosphere of the city when those games are on. And the way Brampton showed up for the Women's World Championship, again, it was just so great to see. That was in April. The weather was so unseasonably warm. People were tailgating, but people were doing it, right? They were showing up. So I really enjoyed it. And I've been spoiled with just absolutely fantastic sporting experiences in Toronto. The Jays games I went to, same thing, really good crowds. It was during the week, and again, beautiful afternoon. It was last June I went, and they were playing the Astros, and the roof was open. I'm like, this is amazing. I love this. So for me, I've had great experiences, and it's hard to compare the two. I haven't spent enough time in the Toronto area yet to really get a hold on what the sort of temperature is, because here in Rider Nation right now the temperature is really heating up when it comes to, we want to see football. We are so
Mhm.
ready for this. We can't wait to get going. There's this air of optimism. I know that the changes made in the off season, that was a big part of it, but you can feel it. You can feel it. And of course you're sort of bombarded with it in the media too, because it's such a big part of life and the news cycle here in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, for almost 10 years I've had Trevor Harris show up on the show. But I gotta call your publicity department and ask permission to talk
Oh,
to him.
now? Oh, okay. See,
It'll
I
be the
didn't know
first
this.
year we won't have him on. We haven't had him on yet. But I just haven't pushed it. But maybe I'll call now that I had you on. I
He's
really,
a busy
really
man. He's a busy
yeah,
man.
I really enjoy. I have lots of friends in Saskatchewan. I was at the Grey Cup in Saskatchewan. I know them pretty well, and all David. I'll answer that question from my perspective, from being a
Mm,
visitor there. In Saskatchewan, it's everybody has a stake in the team. It's not like Toronto, even for the Maple Leafs. As much as the Leafs have such a large following, the percentage isn't as high as it is in Saskatchewan. People talk about the Montreal Canadiens being a religion. I don't know what word we could use for Saskatchewan, Daniela, but something like that, because it's a way of life for them. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are a way of life for the people in Saskatchewan. It's their team. And when the Rush started, I had on our show, on our lacrosse show, we
mm.
had the owners of the Rush on when they moved from Edmonton, and the passion that's in Saskatchewan for their teams is not comparable to anywhere else, because it's everybody. I shouldn't say it's everybody. It feels like everybody's invested in the teams. I don't know if that's a good fair description, but
It's fair. It does feel that way, and I think one of the challenges, and this is just a very much a personal observation, not based on anything concrete, but it is important now that we don't rest on that, because the Saskatchewan Roughriders fan base, like every fan base in the CFL, maybe not everyone. There's a couple teams that are skew a little bit younger, but uh, it's it's an aging fan base. So the last thing you want to do is just assume that everyone feels the same way about a team or about a club. And then you also think it wasn't that long ago, early 2000s even, that they were doing those ticketing blitzes
hmm
and the telethons. So it's important to remember that history, because and the club is very mindful of that. They understand, yes, we've got great crowds that come out, but we need to sell out the stadium. And there weren't that many true sellouts last year, right? We had really great attendance. It's fabulous. But when you actually look at it and you go, okay, we know for sure we had one true sellout with the Labor Day Classic. And then the Grey Cup as well was a sellout. It's just one of those things, right? You need the wins. You still need to have a great product and a great game day experience, which is exactly what the team is focused on.
Saskatchewan's been very loyal to their team, including the government and the people who put together that stadium. It's a beautiful stadium,
Mm,
but it is a bit of a burden, and it's tough on 10 games a year. And they're expecting a lot from the fans. We've heard some things come from the Saskatchewan fans. I know a few of them. They're very, they're very dedicated to their team, but there are some reasons why they don't show up, and one of them is, of course, the fact that if the team plays better, there'll be more fans there. Um, let's talk about the team and how last year was a disappointment. I guess that's a good segue. Last year was a
mhm.
disappointment. Cody Fajardo was a guy that was almost hero worshipped in Saskatchewan, and unfortunately in sports, I think the most important line we can use is, "What have you done for me today? Forget what you did for me yesterday."
Yeah. I actually
That's
funny
tough.
you said those exact words. I was just talking with Brett Lawther on Saturday after the very, very short green and white game. Unfortunately, it was only 4 minutes, 29 seconds long because of the smoky conditions from the wildfires. Uh, but he said the exact same thing, right? Everyone knows that's what this business is. And that's the one thing about Rider Nation, right? You got to take it with the highs and the lows. It's one of the first things I asked Trevor Harris when he got to town. Obviously it had a few icebreaker questions, but you have to ask, okay, are you ready for this? Are you really ready for what you're going to expect? One of the fans at the State of the Nation we also had just this past weekend asked unfortunately, Trevor Harris wasn't part of the panel, but Coach Dickinson was, GM Jeremy O'Day, President CEO Craig Reynolds was. Have you had that conversation with Trevor Harris about the level of expectation in this province? And I have never met anyone, at least, who appears to be as level-headed as Trevor Harris when it comes to this. And I think if anyone can weather the sort of highs and lows of it, it's going to be him. Of course, he doesn't even want to worry about the lows, right? He wants to come out there and get those wins, like everybody does. But you're going to face that adversity, and it's going to be. I'm excited to see how this season runs, because no matter any way you slice it, it's going to be a different story than last season. No matter what, you have different characters, you have different people in the mix, and so far the energy is good. But why wouldn't it be, right? Start of
Yeah,
the
well,
season, so.
well, David, we're used to we're reporting all the time on the coaching carousel. Sorry, the quarterback carousel in the Canadian Football League, right? This is just, oh, we're doing this time.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be those who kind of casually follow the lead. Then when they see a Saskatchewan game, they're going to go, "Hey man, what happened here?" Like, just to see the switches in the between the two teams, like it's crazy to think. But what's the sense that when that Trevor, what is he bringing? You feel in the locker room that might be different, or even just in training camp that this team maybe hasn't seen before.
There's just that. I mean, again, I'm gonna probably sound very flowery when it comes to it, but I'm very much into the storyline, and what you have is what everyone wants: a veteran presence. And what that means is someone who can breathe through the situation. In fact, one of the things, we were just talking one day and he sort of explained he has this breath technique. He didn't create it. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's the physiological breath. It's, you take a big breath in, you take a little bit more, and then you count it out. And the whole thing is he's kind of developed this way of breathing. He does some cold water treatments. All of it is just to get his mind in the right place. And that alone is impressive. And then you add to it that every guy that I've asked, okay, what's your take on quarterback Trevor Harris, goes, this guy takes care of himself. This guy cares. There's just a sense of deep respect on that level, not even necessarily to do with the game. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm just gonna say that there appears to be, at this juncture, which is very, very early on in the season, just a great mutual respect for the type of person he is. And that has got nothing to do, like, he's of course very faith-based, very forward with his faith. So that's another aspect that will certainly be endearing to a number of members on the team. There's just a lot of people who believe in God and who are very open about that. And I know that's another great connection point. So the more connection points you get, not that Cody wasn't, right? Not that there wasn't a respect for Cody in that way, but there is this sort of calming energy around him, especially when he's within the group, amongst the group, just being himself. There's definitely a sense of confidence in who he is that it's hard to say was there with someone who's younger, because they're younger, right? Like, that's not even a slight to anyone. You haven't put the years in. You haven't gone through the ups and downs that someone like Trevor has.
He's learned to be patient as well. And
Very patient.
he's a self dietitian. He's even willing to share his diet techniques with his teammates. So there's that as well. We learned that last year, that when he was in Montreal, when the season started, he was not the starting quarterback, but he still had the patience to be a team player, which I think is really important for a quarterback. And it's part of that level headedness you're talking about, where he
Mm-hmm.
focuses on his game as opposed to his position. Not that he doesn't care about his position.
Of course.
It's that he has a way of, concentrating on when the time comes, he'll be ready. And that's part of the experience he has that I think Cody didn't have. Um,
Mhm.
Cody loved him too. Spoke to him a few times, and he's a bit religious as well. He believes in God
Wonderful
and
guy.
all
I
that stuff.
really can't say
Yeah.
anything bad about him and my interactions with him, right? Like, again, it's not personal. It just comes
Nope.
down to how do you connect with everyone in the locker room? How do you connect within the system? And, it became a sort of a game of chicken and the egg when it came to, is it the O-line or is it the quarterback last season? So it's going to be, I cannot wait for I can't wait for our home opener. We have our season opener before on the road, but especially our home opener, just for the fans to actually see how everyone starts to click and gel in those positions.
Well, David, it's going to be a different run position as well because Trevor's the kind of guy that releases the ball quickly, where Cody was a guy that ran around a lot, right? And that's one of the main differences that impacts the offensive line and the interpretation of how good a job they're doing.
Yeah, and Trevor's a very efficient quarterback too. Like you're gonna see him throw and not make a lot of misses. Let's just say that his completion percentage, if it's not among tops in the league, that's gonna be a very off season for Trevor Harris. And I remember, Frank, when we had him on the show last year, when it was just after he signed in Montreal, and you know we talked about his kind of demeanor, right? Of a little bit of a different situation for him, where he had been in situations where he wasn't named the starter, and it feels like, but this time around, he wasn't the young up and coming quarterback. He was kind of the veteran that was seen as, okay, let me take a step back and kind of work with at the time Vernon Adams Jr. And it's crazy how it all changed there. But now he is back to being the guy right at the start of the season. So I'm curious to see how he takes that challenge of knowing he knows his role is established. He's already working with guys right out of camp, right? He doesn't have to worry about being like the backseat driver in a way. I think that's going to bring out probably the best in Trevor Harris in a lot of ways.
I will say this, David. I'm glad you mentioned that. Talk about patience. Trevor, he mentioned that he was supposed to be in Saskatchewan in 2019. We don't know the details. It was just that was something that was being talked about. It just didn't work out that way. And it's one of those things I almost get chills thinking about, because if he had been here, who would have known? And what I mean by that is Cody Fajardo wouldn't have had the season he had with us in 2019, which was just such an incredible run. I was so grateful to have a front row seat to all of that. So it really is going to be patience paying off, hopefully. Of course, as a Saskatchewan Roughrider fan, as much as I'm part of the media part of it too, it's just great to see that optimism. I also want to mention, you talked about his efficiency. He completed 6 of 7 passes in the green and white game. I know it was a very, very short game, but it was for 115 yards. And his favorite target, Darrell Walker, caught 3 of them, including this ridiculous one where he like wrapped around the defensive player. And I was like, that's amazing. Should have saved it for TSN. But yeah, it's really exciting, and the crowd was into it. But of course, had to be cut short. Would have loved to see the rest. I know it's a practice scrimmage, but it's always fun to see them in action.
If my
Yeah,
math works, that's almost that's almost a pass every 30 seconds
Yeah, it
because
was
it was so
fast. It was
short.
fast.
and
Moving
that and
down the
that's gonna be
field.
his tag.
And
That'll be his
it was
tag.
his very first throw that was incomplete. It was just a little bit overthrown, and then the rest were all right on target.
Sorry, David, go ahead.
well, no, and I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if they kind of knew that they were going to have a full game of this. So Trevor's like, all right, we're going to work quick here because we don't have a lot of time here. But we just saw in in Alberta, they just try to get a game going there, and it went through, thankfully. But it must be really eerie knowing that all this is going on while there's a very tough situation going on in Western Canada with the wildfires.
Yes, and actually, we had a fan ask that question at State of the Nation, and it's going to be a consideration possibly this whole season, and it would certainly affect BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, depending on the wind direction and the severity of it, because you can't have fans sitting in that sort of poor air quality, and you certainly can't have players playing in that sort of really low bad air quality. So it was bad enough that you could smell it to the point of it felt like there was a campfire beside you, right? It's very thick and heavy and very uncomfortable.
It's unhealthy. So,
Mhm.
this is all part of the protocols to protect the players, the fans, and that, that's one of the things one of the leftovers from the pandemic is where we've begun to
Yeah.
realize that health concerns do have to be considered. So they are, and we applaud anything that helps people be healthier. It's just a lesson that we've learned. Let's talk a little bit about your receiving core because I don't
Yeah.
think they've had as good a receiving core as they might have this year since the presidents.
It's been, yes. I mean, we had such high hopes, right? I mean, we had Duke Williams last year, who definitely underperformed, wasn't utilized. just the way it goes. Plenty of injuries, unfortunately, too. But right now, Mitch Picton is someone who just comes to mind. Canadian Regina-born player, has only ever played football in Regina. Actually, he's having a heck of a camp, and he was starting to light up a little bit towards the end of the season as well. We just signed a new wide receiver. I had his name right here. I'll have to find it. But we are changing things up. Yeah, Randy Satterfield was just signed today, and unfortunately, in exchange to be released, or who was released, was injured American Jake Herslow. And Jake Herslow was also having a great camp, but he just injured himself too bad. So maybe he'll come back. We'll see what happens. But trying to think who else coming to mind. Of course, great to have Braden Lenius back. He's super jazzed about it. We didn't have him for the bulk of last season. Unfortunately, Kian Schaefer-Baker, they're thinking around Labor Day. Not a bad time to bring in some good energy, but he's on the mend, right? He had to have some pretty big surgery, so that'll be a question. We already told Coach Dickinson we're going to be asking you every week. What's the update on Schaefer-Baker? So that's something to be mindful of. But that Winicky, Darrell Walker, all of those players are going to be key. And the Winicky Trevor Harris combo is one that I know fans are really looking forward to. Like, if they can keep that chemistry up, and they have such good chemistry because they're so close. Their families are best friends. So it's really nice to know your best friends. There's no way you're not going to be able to connect on the field, hopefully, right? If everyone's playing as they should be.
Well, and yeah, I mean that's always been a question with the offense, right? We know the defense has been the constant in Saskatchewan. What's I guess maybe for the offense is good to go up against a defense like this in training camp, so they get that practice. But how is the feeling around the defensive unit right now?
Defensive unit, I mean, again, spirits are high. It's early on. Nick Marshall, I love that. I'm trying to keep my eye on him. He's had 2 interceptions in camp. I mean, he's just known for having his pick sixes and setting a franchise record last year for the number of pick sixes that he has and the number of games that he had played at that point. But I mean, he's also one to watch because he's got that great veteran presence about him. So when he's on, he's on. Our defense, again, personal take on this one, of course, it slid. It wasn't consistent last season. And that does speak, I believe, overall to morale on the team, to overall just the energy. There would be times when it was flat on both sides of the ball. So I will say, obviously, having someone like Derek Moncrief back in the mix, that's huge. Pete Robertson is going to be great. Anthony Lanier II is doing all that work on the interior for us. Like, it's good. We've got a solid defense, and it's nice to see those names coming in. It's now going to be a matter of just finding some of those good spots and trying to figure out where we want to put some of these newer people, of course.
Both the Riders and the Argos, when I was in Nova Scotia to watch the game in Nova Scotia, that was a transition moment for both organizations. They were both basically in the same place where they were having I call them silly discipline problems, not real serious ones. And the Argos from that point started to clean things up. They ended up winning the Grey Cup. I mention it for that reason, that, you guys ended up coming back home. It seemed like a dozen players had COVID when they came back from that event. And the team never recovered, from that moment. I guess what I'm trying to say is, hopefully they learn something from the experience and understand that they can be in that position and still win a Grey Cup, because the Argos proved that they straightened the passion that they have and used it correctly, if I can use that term.
Yeah.
And then made it a positive, a jumping off point to have a better season.
And that's, Frank, you hit it on the head, right? I mean, Winnipeg had their best season ever. Yes, they made it to the Grey Cup game. They didn't win it, right? It does come down to who you are and your heart as a team. And as someone who I respect the Argos, I have no bad blood against them. It was nice to see that team shape itself and rally itself and understand it's game by game. Well, not even game by game, play by play, and just going at that steady pace. I sort of flinched when you mentioned the touchdown Atlantic game, because to me it was the game right before. So the game right before for Saskatchewan, home game, we won it. was our last home win of the season,
Yeah.
the one against Ottawa. So we're talking about mid-July here. One against Ottawa where Jeremiah Mazzoli was tackled down, caused a whole bunch of issues. He, of course, was out for the season. And it was after that then we go to Toronto, or not Toronto, sorry. We go out east,
Halifax. Yeah.
yeah, to Halifax, to the Atlantic, and we have a helmet incident. And there's all of this weird stuff going on. I mean, that was a game we could have won. We could have won that game. There's no bones about it. And then, of course, we come back for the rematch and we still can't get ourselves together. We're sick. There's sickness. We finally have a bye. Then we have the stomach flu game. And then we release a player. And then it's just on and on and on. There's just this drama that kind of clouded everything. And really did feel, Frank, to your point, that we just couldn't find a way to turn that around, to look at that adversity and go, we can still make something of this. You would hear it from players. Players would say that, right? At scrums and at practice, they would say it, but it's almost like there wasn't that overall, as a unit, a belief in, we just do what we need to do. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I obviously wasn't in the locker room. It's a feeling, right? When you're standing right beside a group of people, there's an energy they give off, and you can tell when that energy just dims or when it flattens straight out. And there were times I'd be on that sideline and it's not even halfway through the third quarter. It's just flat, right? It's tough. It's tough. And okay, if you can't pick yourself up, if you can't find that other gear, this is it. And it was. We didn't win a home game for the rest of the season.
Yeah, mojo is something special. It's not something that you can. I don't know if I can use the word. You can't fabricate it. It has to almost be like catching lightning in a bottle. And when the bottle is closed and you can't get the lightning in the bottle, it seems. It's very frustrating. David and I cover the Argos. I've been covering for a long time. David has been covering them for a long time. And we've seen Argo teams that can't get that lightning in the bottle. So we understand what Saskatchewan went through. And that's part of the reason why we were amazed. I was amazed. I shouldn't speak for David. I was amazed that the Argos did what they did, progressed with a lot of the sideline issues they had. These are human beings. We forget sometimes that we're talking about human beings here. We're not talking about machines. And sometimes the slightest little, I don't know, nuance, a part of their day, part of their week work, part of being on the sidelines, playing the game. There's such a little thing could change everything for the positive or for the negative, or just keep things on an even keel. So it's a very emotional game. So you're telling us basically that, Saskatchewan's off to a fresh start. They're looking for a fresh start. They've got a new coach. David, they also have a new offensive coordinator. That, at the end of last year, the question was, is it the offensive coordinator? Is it the quarterback? Is it the offensive line? Well, they got two of the three question marks are gone. So now all that's left is the O-line and whatever changes were made in the offseason.
Yeah, and that was kind of one of the bigger questions for Saskatchewan when they were trying to figure out after Jason Moss left, like what was going to be like the domino, right? Who's going to be the one to step up? Was there? I mean, I know the fans in Saskatchewan were kind of really they were keeping their eyes on the whole situation. I guess there was maybe a little worry when you see one guy get picked up or another guy decides to stick around. I know that the Pete Costanza from the Argos was among one of those that was in discussions, but then he decided to stick around. Like, was there a sense of any panic in Riders Nation during that point? I know that they're happy with what they got now, but it seemed like I know some people were messaging me, asking me what I thought, and I said, look, you don't want to rush into these things. You don't want to make it in the mood out of desperation.
Yeah.
Like,
David, you ask if there's I always feel like there's an undertone of panic at any given
there
point.
Always is with a group.
There always is. I mean, you have to remember, we don't have that many cups. We have a rich history, but not that many championships. So I think there's always that air of, when can we fully believe, right? And obviously you want to be believing every time you can, and it's just hard, right? So I think there is always an underlying sense of panic. I do remember, I'm just trying to go back to that moment in time of, okay, everyone's picking up everyone's making signings, everyone's making moves. What about us? What about us? Right. And I do remember at the time fans really being hard. It makes sense. They're hard on the organization, on the upper management, the people making decisions. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being passionate and having that. They were really hard at that time. They went, oh, no one's doing anything. No one's not realizing there's conversations happening. There's the fact that people make decisions. You mentioned Costanza, and I loved his tweet, who made it very, very clear, I'm not going anywhere. Why are you guys getting on my case? So, people want to stick to where they are and be loyal when they have that choice. And not everyone just wants to make a move for the sake of making a move. And now that we're over on this side of things, it's nice. You can breathe a little bit. But yeah, you talk about panic. I think there's always a little undercurrent of it here. We always want to make sure that we do the right thing, even in the decision to release Cody, or to move on from Cody, I should say. There were a lot of people who were like, oh no, this is the end of us because he's going to go on and be amazing. And in my personal take on it is always, I hope that's the case. I would love strong quarterbacking across the league. I want great competitive games. I want people to succeed. Someone's got to win the game at the end of the day, but it would be really great to see some really good football across the league at all times, right? I mean, that's what makes games fun to watch. And I also think that that's exactly why people move on and people find new teams to be a part of. They hope to be better. So to me, I'm like, I think this makes total sense. We want Trevor to come here and be better. They're going to take Cody and they want him to be better. To me, there's no losing in that, but there's always that little bit of undercurrent of, oh goodness. I think I relate it to when I was doing the post-game show last year, to when people break up, right? It's like, I don't want you to be mine, but I also don't know how much I want you to succeed without me. But it's like, let them go live their life and be amazing. So I do mean that when I say, I think Cody is going to have I'm hoping he has a good season.
Yeah, don't be better with someone else than you are with me. Oh my
I'm
God.
so
Don't do
hurt
that.
by this. Meanwhile, it's a business, right? Come on.
Hey, I like what you're saying on this program, on this show for the last few years. David and I have always agreed on one thing more than anything else, and that is that we'll never have too many good quarterbacks,
Mhm.
right, David?
Sure.
We'll never have too many good quarterbacks, and you're right. We agree with that. I can say that with total certainty. One thing's for sure, though. Today in the game that they played today, Calgary used, count them, 4
Ooh,
quarterbacks.
nice.
They used 4 quarterbacks in one game, and they were, a couple of them were pretty good. I think it's really important, and Danielle, tell us how you feel about the expanding of the quarterbacks on the roster.
Mm.
We've talked about a third quarterback dressing, especially with that new
Yep.
rule, where you can use 2
Which we
quarterbacks on the
haven't,
field at the
which
same.
wasn't utilized really, right? Last season? Yeah.
Absolutely,
So, I mean, I'm
absolutely.
here for what offensive coordinators can dream up. I'm excited to see some plays, some interesting changes. I'm glad you mentioned it, because right now, what's going to happen on Saturday, right? The Riders preseason game here in Regina, taking on the BC Lions, is you'll for sure see 3 quarterbacks for the Riders, none of which is Trevor Harris. Trevor Harris will actually be in Ohio. His wife is giving birth to their 3rd child, and it's just wonderful. I'm so glad that it's timing is everything, right? So we know he's our guy, and it's the preseason. I know he would love to be there, and he might actually be back in time, but even if he is, he's not playing. He'll be on the sideline, but he's not playing. So it's going to be Shea Patterson, Mason Fine, Jake Dolegala. They'll be dueling it out. But right now, as of today, that race for QB2 is super tight. And even head coach Craig Dickinson said, if at the end of camp we like these guys this much, we might not get rid of any of them. Like, we might try to figure out some way to keep them, and of course, utilize them more. We had fans asking, one thing that came up last season, you threw the backups in, they were not ready, right? They didn't have the game reps. How do you get them to that point? And so, I mean, now at least Mason Fine and Jake Dolegala have had game reps. The only thing is, we do need to find a way to utilize them more during the season. And I think, I mean, that's without giving too much away. Of course, they'll never tell you their whole game plan, but it looks like they're going to consider that. They're going to consider ways that they can utilize these other quarterbacks, whether it's short yardage or not. But to also then give Trevor Harris, who is in amazing shape, who is healthy, but just keep him healthy, right? No need to overstress your starter if you've got confidence in your game plan and in some of the other members of your team. So I like this idea. I am very excited to see which teams can actually come up with some useful use of having these two quarterbacks on at one time.
Yeah, I'm very pro using other quarterbacks other than just one. One of the problems with having just one quarterback that can play, and if you don't give the secondary quarterbacks an opportunity, is that when that player gets semi hurt, not badly, but hurt enough that he shouldn't be playing, but out of desperation, we've got to keep him in there, and then the injuries get worse. So I'm a firm believer that you need a healthy quarterback, and if that quarterback is not healthy as he should be, then he should be given a chance to recover, which is why you need somebody that you can have faith in to at least, I guess the way I would put it is, and the way Saskatchewan a few years ago they needed a secondary quarterback to at least, and this is where Cody Fajardo came in, where he at least didn't lose the game, right? And then give the rest of the team a chance to win the
Every
game. So that to me is what a backup has to do.
Frank, everything you just said is exactly what happened with the Riders last season, right? I mean, Cody came into the regular season with a bit of a leg issue, and it just got worse and worse and worse. Doesn't help that he took the most sacks in league history. I mean, what an awful record to set, right? But it's the truth. But by far, right, we allowed the most sacks, and also considering we didn't play a single postseason game, but that's besides the point. At the end of the day, everything that you just said, Frank, would have been helpful. We needed that. We needed that person who we could rely on in that way, and we didn't have him. And then at the end of the season, right, they decided let's put our backup in for the last two games, see how they do.
Yeah. I mean, it couldn't be any worse than the 2015 Montreal Alouettes, who I think used 6 quarterbacks in that one season.
Oh my God!
Talking about having to throw anything.
Yeah, guess who was on that team?
I'm just trying to think.
Never mind. It's okay.
A little while back for the memory, a good old memory. But
yeah, you're too young to remember that season. I don't mean you, Danielle. I mean David.
Okay. 2015 was yesterday.
It seems like just yesterday. Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about the league. Every year comes up with rules, and as far as I'm concerned, I've always liked all the rules that they put in. I know a lot of people they had immediate negative feelings about certain rules, but as they played out, the pass interference, all the rules that we've seen, downfield, starting the, kick return, from moving them up a little bit, all that stuff, I think that was pro offense, which the Canadian Football League is a tag thing. This year, they've changed their tack. Now they're more getting into the nuance of the rules of the game. What do you think of the way under not to criticize or pat Randy Ambrosi in the back, but how the league, because he's the guy in charge, how the league has concentrated in different ways to improve the game?
I'm gonna have to follow the suit of a number of people I've spoken to, and it makes sense. One of the things to really think it's a bit of a that's a good sign is that all the rule changes that happened last year, arguably much more major to the game on the surface, all have did what they were supposed to do, just like you said, right? They wanted to activate the offense, get it going, and they did that. And so the rule changes this year, I think when you talk about the nuances, we'll see how they play out. I know one that's definitely going to be intriguing to see how it kind of works is replacing that one Canadian starter with a naturalized American for up to 49% of the snaps. So I know for the Riders, one thing that Jeremy O'Day had mentioned was that Mario Alford, right? He could be someone that they selectively decide to put on offense, to spell a Canadian receiver, possibly. I mean, he's just got so much speed. He's he is a touchdown machine when you can give him the ball. So that's a good example of that. The nuances, as you said, I'm just trying to go through some of them. It's interesting, right? Like, so one thing I like is that now you've got a bit more symmetry with things. So the football no longer has to be handled for that single to be given on a kickoff starting the CFL season. And that just aligns with that single rule on kickoffs with all other kicking plays. Okay, good, right? Let's make it more uniform. Let's see how that goes. Then there's rules about restricting the number of players on the line of scrimmage, depending on either side of the long snapper. So it will be interesting to see how these little changes maybe affect gameplay and who's going to notice them. I think the average fan might not even, I shouldn't say average fan, sorry. A casual fan obviously might not notice some of those changes. So be interesting to see how it plays out. I think overall, I don't have a problem with it. I do like this one that starting this year, teams cannot have players wearing both a 0 and a double 0. You can only have one. You can either be
Pick
double
your 0.
0 or
Pick
what?
your 0.
Because we have Roland Milligan, who was the double 0. And I can't remember. Did we have a 0 last year? We probably did. I'm sorry, Rider Nation, if I forget. But I remember that was sometimes a tricky one. I always remembered him easier because he was double 0. It's such an odd number to see that I'm like, oh, that's Roland Milligan. Yeah, no big deal.
You get the last question, David.
Maybe just maybe a little bit of predictions of like how do you think the West shapes up? Like what's your
Oh boy.
I am so bad at predictions. I love this. Okay, great one, David.
Well, for Saskatchewan to get in, to make it simpler, for Saskatchewan to get in, who do you think they can overcome?
Okay.
For them to finish
I
first,
shouldn't
second,
take
or
this
third.
seriously because I haven't even really seen
Oh,
the teams
absolutely,
yet.
absolutely.
But I'm going to shake it up. I'm going to say that this year is they can overcome the Stamps. I'm gonna put that down on the line there. And
Edmonton's not
Lions?
ready.
Yeah. See, and okay, because I see them as a potential dark horse that I'm a little concerned about. I don't know.
That's the flip side of not ready.
Yeah, exactly.
The surprise
Exactly.
team, right?
Okay, I'm gonna be bold and say that. So I mean, to me, I still see obviously the Bombers being great contenders in the West. I can't see why not. And yeah, so we'll see how that shakes out.
or
I'd be shocked if we were number 1 in the West. I'd love it, but I would be shocked.
do you think the crossover comes into play at all?
We've got Montreal that, if you haven't noticed, Montreal had problems with ownership, lost a couple of players. Hamilton has an MVP at quarterback. The Argos won the Grey Cup. Ottawa played without a number 1 quarterback all year last year, so
Ottawa could be
that
someone.
makes it tough.
Someone could be a team that comes up. They were starting to see. No, it was Montreal last season. I was starting to see that momentum swinging. So who knows?
Yes.
It's been a long time since that happened, but maybe they can carry that momentum on despite some of the changes. I know that does make a difference. Yeah, the East is going to be interesting. How does Hamilton react to being the host of Grey Cup? Because I know here in Rider Nation, it was pressure, pressure, pressure. You have to be in your home hosting. Of course, the last time it was such a wonderful miracle in 2013, but that's such a difficult task to get to that point. So I'm not really answering your
Hamilton
question,
heard
but I agree with you, Frank. Basically, is that
Hamilton heard that they could have 43. They thought they heard coaches. It was actually players that they're allowed to have. That's another one of the things that David and I are wondering about.
Yeah, lots of questions.
So that should be really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the final thing I'd like to do is thank you for joining us because of the Her Network. The CFL has done a great job in trying to integrate women into football. Many of them belong. It's obvious they belong. We've interviewed a couple, and thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the time to chat. I love talking football, and this is kind of getting me ready for this weekend where we dive right back into pregame, postgame, sideline work. I know it's preseason, but it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, we were like preseason.
Hey,
Hey, David, we're like
football.
preseason.
Football is football, and there's only 2 preseason games now, right? Remember the time when it was,
Absolutely.
4 apiece, or wasn't it
Absolutely.
more than 4 at one point? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, it was I think 3 last year, David, and before that was 3, I
Well, and
think.
you actually get to watch all of them if they're not all on TSN. That's the big one.
Yeah, and then now that's the best thing that they've done is that you can stream all the games, and that's awesome. And they're in on demand as well once the game goes off being live. Live, you have to watch it live. There's no zooming or no getting rid of whatever. You have to watch it live. So it's still great. The Canadian Football League has a lot of things that they need to do, but the one thing they do is they put together a pretty good Grey Cup every year.
I loved it. Like this past
yeah,
Grey Cup, that was what a game. Number one, I mean, you never know what to expect when it comes down to the game, and that was just an incredible ending. And then I just loved the atmosphere, and it was so nice to have it in my home city for now, for sure.
yeah, I loved being there. It was awesome. It's a great place to watch football. I admittedly they weren't as thrilled because they weren't in it. It was
Yeah, that's
difficult
so
that way.
tough, right? I mean, that's the dream. The dream is what happened in 2013, right? Get to go to the Grey Cup
Yeah,
at home
yeah,
and win it.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Daniella, thanks for doing
Thank
this.
you. Appreciate it.
David, as usual, a giant pleasure to work
Always
with
a
you.
pleasure, Frank.
Okay, he's David Morassutti. She's Daniella.
Wow.
I just screwed up her name, Ponticelli. My mother's gonna kill me.
You got it out
I'm
right
sure
at the
she's doing.
beginning, so that's all that matters.
I know. It's okay. I'm just half asleep. What can I say? Listen, thanks for doing this, David. Again, thanks for doing this. He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk. Of course, it airs live every Monday at 9 p.m. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. I'm Candid Frank. Don't forget Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube.